Yo YouTube, what's up? We are going for another video today. We will be ranking all of the W engines, and what we will be doing specifically is we are gonna look at how good of a pull these engines are in terms of account value. Which basically means Weeping Cradle, okay, this is a standard one. Let's take this one. Let's say Ellen has a rerun and you are running this. How many units can you actually use this on? And right after I decided for this idea, the dear user Splatoon or Sky actually basically asked this question over on Reddit. So if you're watching this Splatoon or Sky, there's your answer hopefully. We will also be having open Pritrin right here, just so we can also have everything on there. We have also included the Battle Pass engines because, you know, effectively you are spending money for them. Alright, we are gonna start off with the W engine from the Battle Pass, Electro Lip Gloss. When there are enemies inflicted with an attribute anomaly on the field, the equipper's attack increases by 16% and they deal an additional 25% more damage to the target. Generally speaking, if you only have one copy of it, it's gonna be just okay. If you want to save money while pulling for your W engine or for Hugo, today's sponsor LDShop.gg got you covered. LDShop is a safe and reliable top-up site for your favorite games such as Zenless Zone Zero, Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves or also Genshin Impact. Created by LD Player, LDShop offers you affordable prices through official ways and does not require any account credentials. Your server and UID are enough. LDShop is trustworthy, provides a fast delivery within minutes, and as you can see by the huge amount of positive reviews, is also safe and reliable. Spend over $80 and you will also gain a VIP membership, which can reward you with a free internet membership in-game. Go directly to ldshop.gg using my link in the description or pinned comment and save money today. Hugo is right around the corner and using my link you will receive a 10% off and a 5% off coupon. Thank you LDShop for sponsoring this video, and with that, back to the video. However, in my opinion, personally, it has so far been a very good engine, especially for the low spenders, which honestly can be used on basically every single anomaly unit, except for maybe Miyabi, but Miyabi is like kind of a special case as well. Oh, and Vivian. Vivian and Miyabi do not make the greatest use out of Electro Lip Gloss, however every other unit, this is a relatively, let's call it free-to-play-ish, Dolphinish, it means not free-to-play, but Dolphinish engine, which honestly, especially at R5, is of pretty good value. However, please also keep in mind, because you need 5 copies of this also essentially is €50 or dollar or whatever, you know, depends. Next up, Spring Embrace. A defense engine. Unfortunately, Spring Embrace is just not that good. It reduces damage taken, and the answer to everything which reduces damage taken is always just don't get hit in the first place. There is no benefit of you getting hit except for maybe triggering a quick assist. When attacked, the equipper's energy regeneration increases, which means unless you get hit, you also don't get this energy regeneration. The only point which could be in favor of this would be this one. When the equipper switches off field, this buff will be transferred to the new on-field character with the duration equipped. This honestly could be pretty good if there would be any unit who actually wants to get hit in the first place. However, so far there is no unit which actually says, okay, please hit me. Personally, I would not spend money for this, especially since it's ERR, which basically means it scales with your other energy stuff, but I would not spend money for this. Next up, new and upcoming, the GBO, the Unfettered Game Ball. In my opinion, this has great account value. So there has been one thing which we just found out, which is, for me personally, this part, whenever the equipper's attack triggers an attribute counter effect, this reads as if you actually have to trigger an attribute anomaly, so for example corruption or burn. However, that is not the case. What this basically does is, whenever your support is gonna hit an enemy with the same weakness, then your entire squad will gain up to 20% crit rate. Which means, for example, if you take Nicole and the Nicole does a basic attack, which does physical damage against Hugo, who has a physical weakness, you would give 20% crit rate to the entire team. This obviously, same as with Electrolip Loss and like all of the Battle Pass Vengeance, will cost you $50. However, this is really good if you're short on crit rate. It gives also energy regen, which is pretty good. You can also use this on Astra, for example, if you are going with Astra against an ether weak enemy, every single time you do the quick assist, which will be more often than every 12 seconds, you are just gonna get a free 20% crit rate for every single enemy you are struck. However, please also keep in mind, this is a debuff on the enemy against the struck enemy. This is a debuff, this is not a buff on yourself, which also means, for example, Miyabi's core passive, we can just simply bring that up here. This part here, which basically says, when accumulating build up against targets with Icefire, increases the anomaly build up by 100% of Hoshimi Miyabi's crit rate. However, because this is a debuff on the enemy, it would not help for this, which means you cannot just build 20% less crit rate on Miyabi for this. However, what you can do is you can now build up, let's say 80% and then use this one on a Nicole. You can go for like 68%, but less 56% on your Miyabi. You go for 56% crit rate here. Then you will get another 12% from your 4-piece branch and blade, and then 35% from your Nicole. This will not give you the maximum uptime here, but essentially it allows you to just always crit, which is really good. Well, given your Nicole is M6, of course. So definitely something I would recommend. I'm thinking if this might actually become invaluable over time. However, for now, I don't really want to go about that. We don't talk about this Vengeance. Next up, 6-shooter. Okay, Cannon Rotor is not good. It gives you crit rate, but you have a lot of free weapons, especially from the events, which also give you crit rate and are frankly just better than this one because the additional effect essentially does nothing. It does 200% attack, physical damage. Who cares? This is not worth it. Cannon Rotor is just so bad. 6-shooter. Equip against a charge every 3 seconds, stacking up to 6 times, which means you have to wait 18 seconds to get all 6 stacks. When launching an EX special, consume all charge attacks, and each stack increases the days inflicted by 6.4%. This essentially means what you are gonna get is 6 times 6.4%. If we just pull up the calculator for a second, you are getting 38.4% additional days for your EX special. That is okay. You also have an impact main stat. However, the main problem which this Vengeance has it is only for EX specials. And so far, most stun agents actually wanted to distribute their days over multiple attacks. Chingy has her basics, and sure, you have Collider, for example, who has a really good EX special, but there are just other options available which are free. For example, Steam Oven or Fossilized Core, which essentially are just better while not costing you $50. So I personally would not recommend this. However, it might change in the future. Maybe there is some unit coming, who this one could be really good for. For now, I would just prefer any of the free-to-play craft. And with that, we are done with the Battle Pass. So let's get some stuff out of the way, because we don't really have to talk about them so far. Miyabi's Vengeance is really just good for Miyabi so far. Then we also have... I'm not good with images. Then we also have Playmaker Shaker, which essentially is only really good for Bernice and otherwise not that great, honestly. We also have this engine, which is in here by random. I don't know why it's in here. Honestly, it's mainly these two, which I would... I would put actually... Let's put Elegant Vanity. Elegant Vanity is not necessarily a bad Vengeance. The main problem this one has is it doesn't really do too much outside for Astra, with the main problem being there are other free-to-play Vengeance or also non-free-to-play gacha Vengeance available, such as Bashful Demon or Kaboom, which essentially perform just about even. This is like 3% better. But, just take one of those, take the Vault if you need to, take Kaboom, take Bashful, take any of these and they will just perform as well. Also, the effect of this is kind of difficult for trigger for other units, so I personally would prefer to just run this on Astra, but I don't necessarily think it's worth it to pull for her. Next up, we have the standard weapons. I want to go through the standard weapons a little bit quicker because we have a standard selector guide and a standard weapon guide coming up. Also, you will not really spend money for these, if at all. What you are thinking about maybe is that you are going into the shop here, and then you might be thinking, okay, signal shop, is it worth for me to save 600 of these to buy one of these? And honestly, this is relatively easy to answer. In my opinion, this is only really good for Nekomata. The main problem is the back attack condition, and there are, physical is just scuffed anyway. But the problem is back attacks are not necessarily easy depending on the enemy. Next up, we have the problem that only the M1 of Nekomata actually makes everything which it does her back attacks. So I think this is only good for Nekomata, personally. If you are planning on actually going for Brimstone, I personally think it might be clone. It's not invaluable. It just has great account value. The thing is, it is one of the best options for Sujuran, and you can honestly slap it on basically any attack character who is an on-fielder somewhat, and just uses a lot of basic attacks. So Soldier 11, Nekomata, Sujuan, just a few examples here, and Brimstone will perform just fine. You can even put it on Ellen, and it provides a lot of combat attack. It's a really generically good engine. The only problem is that it is missing crit rate or crit damage, so you need to make up for that using your substats and main stats, which means, in my opinion, it's not perfect, but it's really good. Next up, Fusion Compiler. I think Fusion Compiler has great account value. For attacker units, you usually are looking for crit rate or crit damage main stat, and for anomaly units, whether you are going for pain ratio or for attack percent or anomaly proficiency, usually doesn't matter too much unless, there are a few exceptions. For example, Vivian, who really just wants to stack as much ASP as possible. But especially with, for example, Astra, who now buffs a lot of attack, pen ratio becomes more and more valuable. And you can pair this also really well with, for example, Rina as a support, especially for a Yanaki hyper carry. And the only condition is basically that you are able to use a special or EX special every 8 seconds. Please also keep in mind this deck is calculated separately, so this is kind of important. Grace is able to obviously use this really well. We also get combat attack here, which is really nice. Yanagi can use that surprisingly well as well, especially if it's an on-field hyper carry Yanagi. So there are quite a few characters who nowadays can use that. Let's have a look actually, which characters make great use of that and which ones do not. Alright, we have Miyabi. Miyabi can make use of it. The problem mainly is she doesn't really want that much AP. She is mainly caring about crit rate, crit damage, and maybe attack percent. So that's the thing. Yanagi, we already talked about, great. Bernice does not work that well. On Jane, you can do that mainly because there are a lot of great cancels which you can do with Jane. You can dash cancel basically everything, including her specials. So you can maintain a really good uptime on it. However, other options exist which are a little bit, more annoying, I suppose. But yeah, on Piper, that works. Her EX special will give 2 stacks instantly. You can just cancel her special as well. Vivian is not that great because simply, well, it's kind of annoying to just do this. And in the end, Grace, it's her signature, it works well. So generally, I think it is a weapon which has great account value. However, there are usually other options out there which perform similarly. Actually, I will probably put it here. I would probably put it at okay. I think it has great account value. However, it is somewhat limited and there are other options which make it better. Yep, let's put it into okay. Next up, where do we put Tusk? I think for a defense unit, I would put it in okay. The main reason why I put it in okay is honestly, there are not too many defense units out there which I would argue are fantastic. Generally, the effect, the shield value doesn't really matter too much, to be honest. It's more, this part. Essentially, whenever you triggers interrupt or perfect dodge, basically you will always do that, and it's any squad member. All of your squad member will do 18% more damage and also increase, day stealth. This is really, really good. However, the main problem is who you use this on. If we go into the part and we go for this, we have Caesar, we have Seth, and we have Ben. And no offense, but not everybody has Caesar. Seth kind of fell out a little bit because his main purpose is simply being a, Jane hyper carry, and I know all of the Seth and EO out there. No hate towards EO, I love you. But who do you use this on? Unless you are a Ben main or a Seth main or a Icejapot main, I don't think that this unit so far, that this vengeance so far is of great value for your account. Again, we are not talking about how good the weapon is. The weapon in itself is fantastic. But we don't talk about how good it is in itself. We talk about how good is it if you want to spend $100 for your account. How many units can use it? Are there other options available? And yeah, to be fair, there are not really other options available, but there are also not many units who can use this. So I would argue it is somewhere in between great account value and okay. I would probably put it maybe here. Let's swap these. Simply because there are not many units who can use it. However, the value, if you want to put it on any of the 3 current available characters who actually can use it, is great. So yeah, next up, where do we put it? That's Hellfire's, right? Yes. Hellfire gears. Hellfire gears, in my opinion, is okay. The main problem is that you will rarely get these 2 stacks. You want to use an EX special and you want to use 1 at least every 10 seconds. The main contenders to use this is if you have M2 Collida, Light, who can actually use 2 EX specials directly afterwards. Do we have anybody else who has low cost? No, it's mainly those units. Yeah, it's mainly those 2. If you have M2 Collida or Lighter, which this one is good for, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, it's good. It's not necessarily bad, but I would prefer other options over it. Also, it often, especially at 1 stack, it's often outperformed by free-to-play units. Again, we have Steam Oven, which is fantastic. We have Fossilized Core, which is not that great in Shio. However, it is extremely good in Deadly Assault, especially if your aim is only to get 20k clears. So I would prefer those over this one. Next up, we have the Restraint. So in my opinion, this is somewhat niche. Not because this one is bad. In fact, it has quite a few units can make really good use of this. You know, it's not about that there are no other options available or that this one is bad. We in fact have Lighter who can make good use of it. We have Chingy who can make good use of it. We also have Lycaon who can make good use of it. We also have Trigger, and even Trigger can make good use of it. Pulcra as well. There are many options who can actually use this. The main problem this one has is it good enough? It gives you basic attack damage. Unless you are M6, your stunner is usually not gonna do that much damage. So 30% more damage on your basic attacks. Again, I'm going off the S1 here. It's usually not that fantastic. It's not bad, but you know, it doesn't really matter too much either. And the daze is great. However, it doesn't do anything except that. And unless you are getting an additional stun window out of it, it's not doing anything. Let's say you have 3 stuns using Fossil. And let's say you have 3 stuns or 3.8 stuns using Restraint, because you now do like a lot more days from your basics. Let's just imagine this, you know? It's 3.8 is less than 4, which means you don't get an additional stun window out of that. And before you run this, I would much rather just run, I don't know, Icejapot, because this actually gives at least damage to my team. While, you know, both of these are basic attack heavy or basic attack reliant stun vengeance. And speaking of which, I personally think that Icejapot is actually just okay as well. However, it is above Restraint. Main reason is that, you know, all it does is it gives your entire team 20% damage percent, and there are only a few units who can make effectively use of this. We have Trigger, who can make use of it. However, Trigger has a little bit of the problem that she needs some ramp up time. Then we have Pingyi, who can use it. Obviously, it's her signature weapon, it's not bad. And then we have Lighter, who can also use it pretty effectively. And for these 2 units, they are pretty good. However, for Trigger, it is pretty good as well, but it's much worse in Shiyu because the fight time is just much shorter, so you actually don't get to sustain the stacks as long. And everybody else just has a hard time actually, you know, keeping up with the stacks and actually, you know, building them. So given that you have to spend a lot of money for this, I personally don't necessarily think it's that worth it. Blazing Laurel. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. You remember how I said, you know, all of these are basic reliant. We have the same thing here. In my opinion, Blazing Laurel is probably the best vengeance to pull for a stunner. First of all, upon launching a quick assist or perfect assist, the equipper's impact increases by 25%. This is combat impact with an impact main stat, which is just really good for literally everybody can use this. Everybody can use this. This is already a lot of impact. Secondly, when the equipper launches and hits an enemy with basic attack, apply wilt for 30 seconds, stacking up to 20 times, repeat triggers reset the duration. When any squad member hits an enemy, for every stack of wilt, crit damage increases by up to 30%. Everybody can trigger this. How many stacks you will get will obviously depend a lot on the other character. However, who can use this? Trigger can use this. Again, her ramp up time is longer. Holiday can use this. Sure, her ramp up time is longer, but she can probably sustain this relatively well. Chingy will apply this pretty fast, and I mean, it's lighter signature. He basically gets 30 stacks instantly. Even Pulchra can sustain it. The only other stunner, or the only other two stunners who might have a little bit more of a problem are probably these two, but even then you can on-field them and you can get some stacks of that, while you also gain a lot of impact. If you are thinking of getting a stun Vengeance and you also think about actually using that stunner for ice and fire damage teams, in my opinion, Blazing Laurel is one of the best stun Vengeance to pull. Is it necessary? No, of course not. It is not necessary. But it is a really good Vengeance to pull for. Maybe invaluable is not the right word here, but you know, I'm German, I don't fucking know how to speak English. Do we have another stun Vengeance? Triggers Vengeance. I mean, it's literally can only be used by trigger, so unless you have trigger, don't pull it. Weep. Oh, we forgot Weeping. Yeah, so the thing with Weeping. What Weeping Cradle does is, it essentially is a very short buff, which, you know, a very short damage percent buff you gain, which also is a debuff on the enemy, which essentially just means I personally would just not get it. I think it's an okay Vengeance, but if you look at the vault gives you just, okay, you need to deal ether damage. This is a little bit more conditional, sure, but essentially it gives you 24% more damage, and Weeping Cradle gives you like 21 point something percent. So I personally don't think it's worth it. There are other options out there for supports which are better. What do we do with C? Deep Sea Visitor. So, okay, let's do these three at once. We have Deep Sea Visitor, we have Sujuan's Suppressor Mark 6, and we have Sunshine. These three weapons have, in my opinion, an okay value. They are great stat sticks. However, the problem with these is Heartstring Nocturne exists. And the thing with Heartstring Nocturne is, so far, it is always at the top of the best stat stick available, usually 12 to, or let's say 10 to 15% worse than the signature, usually beating out every other Vengeance down here. Even if you don't have Evelyn, let's say you have Soldier Zero MB, if you don't have the signature, you know, Severed Innocence, just use this one. And, you know, the same can be said for Severed Innocence. I would probably put it at great account. Honestly, we can put it up there as well. Both of these just have insane stat stakes, which are really good. And you know, the thing with these is these are also great stat stakes, but these are just better. You know, you can also, Soldier 11 makes fantastic use of this. So I think if you're pulling for an attacker Vengeance and you don't have any of these below, just get one of these. You know, the amount of crit value you have on these doesn't matter. This is crit damage only essentially, and this one is just crit rate as well as crit damage. And if you have a fire character, a lot of fire resistance threat for your chain attacks and ultimates, it's really good. So the same, I would also argue, can be said for Timeweaver. I would actually, it was nerfed, but I still think it has great account value. It is probably more valuable than all of the others, and because, you know, I have like lip gloss here, I would prefer to put Timeweaver here. It is mainly good for the electric users. However, a lot of the other stuff you can still pretty fulfill quite easily. So if we are going to Yanagi, we're just having a look here. Essentially what this does, you have the electric anomaly build up, and chat, go out of the way. And when special or EX special hitters hit enemies suffering an attribute anomaly, you get 75 AP. You literally will always have this active. There's no way that you're not gonna have this active, and as long as you are above 375 AP during combat, you also will increase disorder damage. It is a really good Vengeance, which is just really good for, you can use it on Bernice, you can use it on Piper, you can use it on Grace, you can use it on even Miyabi or Jane or whoever you really want. You can also use it on Vivian. It is just a really good disorder Vengeance, and in my opinion, it is definitely worth actually using it if you have it. Is it as worth it as it was before? Definitely not, but I still think it's good and I would pull for it. On the other hand, we have Sharpened Stinger. If you have watched one of my last streams, you saw that I pulled for this. Should you do that? No, definitely not. Sharpened Stinger is essentially only good for, you know, I mean, it is fine. Other units can use it, but that's why, you know, it's not here. You know, Piper could use it, other units can use it, but essentially it mainly is really good for Jane. Sure, you know, this part here, the equipper's anomaly build-up rate is increased by 40%. This is a generic 40%, and the same can be said for Vivian's. The Vivian's engine, the Flight of Fancy, also has a generic 40% build-up rate. The difference between these two is, and I actually would order them like this, is the Flight of Fancy gives you 90 AP, 40% anomaly build-up rate, and nobody except for Vivian is gonna be able to trigger this as of right now. However, if we look at the Sharpened Stinger again, what do you need to do? You need to enter combat. You always will enter combat when the fight starts, or trigger Perfect Dodge. You can also trigger Perfect Dodge, you know, with any character. Does it mean you want to do that? Not necessarily, but this will give you instantly 3 stacks, and the stacks are gonna last for 10 seconds, and you will have 40% increased build-up rate. On top of that, for all of this, you will also get 12%, so 36% physical damage. Honestly, these don't really matter too much. I probably would actually, yeah, let's order them like this. Both of them give you 90 AP, 40% anomaly build-up, and one is ether and the other one is physical. How much can you use the physical is the question. In my opinion, the main problem is Sharpened Stinger has a little bit of a harder condition, but at least Piper can use it currently. Flight of Fancy is just, you know, it just exists. Everybody can trigger this. I mean, you don't actually have to trigger it, it just increases your build-up by 40%, no condition whatsoever. But there's no other ether anomaly unit currently, so this effect is just basically possible. We don't talk about this, which means, as of right now, we are finished with this. Chat, do you disagree with any of my placements? Is there any disagreement for any placement where you say, Riff, what the fuck are you doing here? Editor, you can cut out potential waiting time. So give chat just a bit. Rena Sig. Sure, why? Why would you not put Rena Sig down there? You need to defend yourself. Defend yourself. Why is it not down here? Can do it like this, I guess, if that makes you feel better. I would also put S11W engine at the top cause of its power and versatility. I wouldn't. I will answer you in just a second on this. It all looks great to me. I've never seen a Vengeance tier list that has been helpful. Well, happy if it helps. It could be used on Lucy Rena and just give more damage. It's also much better option on Rena than any other. Okay, so Riff Court. I don't have a hammer here, but imagine I have a hammer. Frosto is saying Rena Sig is not placed fairly. Why is it not placed fairly? They are saying it could be used on Lucy, Rena, and just give more damage. It also much better option on Rena than any other. I would agree on Rena, that is certainly true. However, I disagree on the others. The reason for that is if you bring this up for, where is it? Weeping Gemini. During this period, this effect further increases by 1.7% every 0.5 seconds up to a maximum increase of 10.2%, and it lasts for 3 seconds. So what we are doing essentially here is that we are getting half of this value. Because keep in mind, in the beginning we are at 10%, you know, we are at 10%, then we are at 11.7%, then we are at, okay, I'm not gonna do the math, but essentially what you're doing is, you know, every 0.5 seconds you gain more damage, but it will never hit 20.2%. And at this point, the question is, why not just use, you know, Kaboom, which just gives guaranteed a 12% combat attack all the time, regardless of which team you have, up to 16% if you run Lucy or another character who has a little summon. So unless you are running Rena, I don't think that you should actually spend 600 or, you know, if we go into the store, I don't think that it's worth spending 30 pulls instead for literally anything else. At least it could be in the green list. No, I don't I mean, I guess you're right. It's good for 1 unit. You're right, fair enough, it is good for 1 unit. You know, just to make you happy, just to make Proto happy, it is up here. You know, this is Proto's ranking, I want to make this very sure. It's in the only good for 1 unit, I personally would put it here. Next up, Eduardo. Eduardo said, sorry if I mispronounce your name, it's actually not in here anymore. So, never mind. However, Eduardo said, I would put S11W engine at the top also cause of its power and versatility. So I think that is a great idea, however I actually would disagree on that. The main problem is that this one, the Brimstone, has actually a condition. And the condition is that you basically do basic attacks, dash attacks or dodge counters as often as possible. The buffs only last for 8 seconds and the duration of each stack is calculated separately. This is pretty important simply because that means if you do 8 basic attacks on, let's say, Soldier 0 NB, and then you swap to Chingy and then you do your Chingy stuff, the moment where you go back into the stun window, all of your stacks are gone. And you don't do basic attacks on Soldier 11. Not Soldier 11, on Soldier NB. So, and if we look at this, how many of these characters are on field enough to actually get a lot of stacks and be able to maintain them? Nekomata can do this really well. Zhuang can do this because her entire stun combo is essentially, you know, just basic attacking, unless, you know, ultimate and EX. And even if you play her with Nicole and Astra, she just basic attacks all the time. Same for Soldier 11, a lot of basic attacks. Adomasa, a lot of dash attacks. Ellen, if you on-field her, you actually have quite a bit of basics, however it's not that great during the stun. You can not really use it that well on Soldier 0, you cannot use it that well on Evelyn, you can, Billy I don't know, Corin you can do that, but not as well, and Anton I have no idea. So essentially you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of 9 units who can actually make somewhat good use of that. Again, I don't know about these two, possibly you can, I don't want to judge it. So at least 5. The problem is, all of these... Why is my headset dying? Anyway, editor, please cut my headset dying. All of these, essentially, well, these two, give you the same amount damage or higher damage consistently for all units. And that is the main reason. This is unconditional 24% crit rate and 50% crit damage on top of what you ever get for fire damage. This is unconditional 88% crit damage. 88, right? It's 30% and 48, 78. 78% crit damage. This one is combat attack, but you need to be able to maintain it, which not every unit can. You can probably put it here, but I don't really want to rank these because essentially you don't really spend money on this, you spend 30 pulls for this. Or you lose your 50-50. That's the main reason. Oh yeah, sure, you also get, you know, this, but this is conditional, so I don't include this. Usually you will be able to do this, but I'm only looking at the unconditional stuff. The unconditional is 78% crit damage, and this is, you know, 50% crit damage and 24% crit rate, and this one not everybody can fulfill to a great extent. So, in my opinion, this will be the final tier list. I cannot talk about, well, this is not even S rank, I cannot talk about this, so we will leave that one out. But essentially, I think if you are looking for a stun vengeance, just get Blazing Laurel. It is such a good generic stun vengeance. Nearly every stunner can use the first effect, and even the second effect can be used by quite a lot of them to a pretty good extent. So very good, especially if you are looking for a boost to your ice and fire damage. Obviously, if you have lighter, get it anyway. Timeweaver is still after the nerf, still good. It's still at usually 90 to, well, 88 to 95% range of other signatures. So really good as well. These two are just massive stat sticks. So that is basically what I would go for. For the battle pass specifically, if you are looking to buy the battle pass and you are not sure which vengeance I want to get, you should look, okay, how is my crit rate currently looking? If you are low on crit rate, this one is a great support engine, the Unfettered Game Ball. And if you are short on Anomaly Vengeance and you are not looking specifically for Miyabi or Vivian, those are the only two others who cannot use it that well, you are looking at Electro Lip Gloss, which is really good. However, please keep in mind, you do want 5 of them. So you're essentially, you know, spending half a year of time and $50 for this. So yeah, that has been the video. I hope this has been helpful. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with any of this. I'm very open for discussions. Most of these are not necessarily in order, so if you disagree whether this should be here or this should be here, yeah, leave me a comment. Thank you for the algorithm boost. Thank you very much for watching. Chat, say goodbye to YouTube, and word of the day is gonna be Brimstone. I'm just gonna steal this for Poki. Peace!